It's been a wild ride for Witcher fans, but I want to go back to the beginning and explain why the short story Lesser Evil is so great. And I want to prod a little bit on the TV adaptation, even when they're making relatively faithful adaptations. With the Lesser Evil, they missed the mark on what made the short story so great. So stay a while and listen. The story opens with the protagonist Geralt entering into a small town. Geralt is a witcher, which is a monster hunter for hire, but also a specialist in breaking curses. Our story begins introducing the idea that witchers are not well liked as he enters into the town. As usual, cats and children noticed him first. A striped tomcat, sleeping on a sun-warmed stack of wood, shuddered, raised his round head, pulled back his ears, hissed and bolted off into the nettles. It's though there's something unnatural about witchers that cats are the first to notice. Geralt has brought the corpse of a kikimor, a kind of monster, into the village for payment, but there is a unfortunate twist or cruel irony. People have gone missing, but they didn't know it was a kikimor, therefore there is no reward. Geralt has done what he thought was the right thing, but it didn't matter. In one sense, if he had let things play out longer, and more people had died, he would have gotten his payment. He ended the problem before anyone realized there was a problem. This, by the way, is a great way to show a cruel and senseless world, whereas the TV adaptation is a bit daft. The reason The Witcher's not paid is
Kikimores are useful. Population control.
Wanting a man-killing monster hanging around your village for population control on the surface seems even more evil, but strikes me as a bit odd and rather silly. But they point him in the direction of a local reclusive wizard. Maybe he will pay. The wizard doesn't want the corpse either, but the wizard wants Geralt's help. The wizard is being hunted, and we are introduced to our first fairy tale element. The Curse of the Black Sun. There's a prophecy. The Black Sun was to announce the imminent return of Lilith and the extermination of the human race. Lilith's path was to be prepared by 60 women wearing gold crowns who would fill the river's valleys with blood. Stregobor himself has done autopsies. Geralt, what we found inside the skull and marrow could not be described. Some sort of red sponge, the internal organs were all mixed up, some were completely missing. What was the wizard's solutions? To kill the girls. Don't forget that we were acting in the people's defense. The mutant girls would have drowned entire countries in blood. Picking them out was extremely difficult, and that's why we stopped getting rid of them and started isolating them instead. Your famous towers, snorted the Witcher. Our towers. But that was another mistake. We underestimated them. Many escaped, then some mad fashion to free imprisoned beauties took hold of princes, especially the younger ones, who didn't have much to do and still less to lose. Most of them, fortunately, twisted their necks. Now, this is kind of funny. Why are all these Rapunzel-like towers spread across the countryside? The wizards believe there's a curse on all these girls. It's a fun integration of a familiar fairy story into the Witcher universe, but with its own twist to make it fit into this world. But then Stregobor gets to his specific problem, who is chasing him down, and we get another fairy tale. There's a small kingdom, and Aradia, a wise, educated woman, a stepmother type figure. She had many exceptional adepts of the magical arts in her family, and through inheritance, no doubt, she came into possession of a rare and powerful artifact, one of Nehelinia's mirrors. They're chiefly used by prophets and oracles because they predict the future. Aradia quite often turned to the mirror, with the usual question, I take it, interrupted Geralt. Who is the fairest of them all? I know, all Nehelinia's mirrors are either polite or broken. So now we've entered the Snow White fairy tale, with a wry commentary on how these mirrors work. But in this case, the stepmother Aradia was more interested in her country's fate, so says Stregobor, and the mirror answered her questions by predicting a horrible death for her and a great number of other people, by the hand of this Snow White type character, who will soon be called Renfri. Now, Geralt has a code of ethics.
A man must have a code. Oh, no doubt.
As much as he seems like he's a mercenary for hire only, and he has this gruff exterior, Geralt only hires himself out to go after actual monsters. In the Witcher universe, the humans treat other races very poorly, whether it's elves, dwarves, gnomes. There's a lot of persecution, and a lot of beings are called monsters. But if Geralt finds that they're sentient, capable of speaking, one, he'll refuse the contract in the first place, but two, he'll find some workaround if he finds out that they're not as monstrous as otherwise. So Stregobor must convince the Witcher, say that this Renfri, this Snow White character, is equal to a monster. And he provides proofs. She managed to torture a canary and 2 puppies during that time, and also gouged out the servant's eye with the handle of a comb. I carried out a few tests using curses, and most of them confirmed that the little one was a mutant. The wizard Stregobor wanted to put the girl up in one of his towers, but like the Snow White story, Aradia wants to kill the girl. She sends her out with the trapper. But in this universe, there is no friendly hunter. The trapper is a vile human being who assaults the girl, who in turn kills him in self-defense. As Geralt says, "If you think I feel sorry for him," muttered Geralt, "then you're wrong." The stepmother Eridea and Stregobor the wizard continue trying to track the girl down, and the girl falls in with some not quite so friendly dwarves. It's 7 gnomes from Mahakam, whom she managed to convince it was more profitable to rob merchants on the road than to pollute their lungs with dust from the mines. She was known as Shrike because she liked to impale the people she caught on sharp poles while they're still alive. Several times Eridea hired assassins, but none of them returned. The gnomes died, and Renfri managed to ensconce herself in a small kingdom, offing the former king and marrying the elder son. And now the tables are turned. The stepmother is killed. Stregobor suspects Renfri is at fault. In any event, Renfri begins pursuing the wizard. But because she's not a monster, Geralt doesn't want to. And this is where the wizard makes his pitch. She's worse than a monster. You brought a Kikimora here. Shrike's worse than a Kikimora. A Kikimora kills because it's hungry, but Shrike does it for pleasure. Stregobor says, "We didn't know for sure whether these girls that we were killing and imprisoning in towers were actually going to turn into monsters. When we listened to the prophecy, many of us had doubts, but we decided to accept the lesser evil. Now I ask you to make a similar choice." But Geralt won't make that choice. "I'm not a pious hermit. I haven't done only good in my life. But if I'm to choose between one evil and another, then I prefer to not choose at all." We have our setup. We have our unexpected introduction of a twisted, dark fairy tale. So now we move to what I like about Sapkowski's short stories. It's his endings. I'm fascinated by short stories, mostly because I can't write them. All my ideas end up being novel length and long ones at that. So reading, for instance, Chekov's short stories are a treat. They're these little vignettes, these slices of life. But at the end, there's this little, I don't want to say twist, but a subtle turn where it's, oh, that's funny. Oh, that's really good. The last couple sentences of a lot of Chekhov's short stories are like that. A little turn at the end, the kicker that makes it a really satisfying read. And I would argue Sapkowski often has that same feel to the ends of his stories. And none more than the lesser evil. The setup is, there's an impasse. The wizard is safe in his tower. Forever. But he can't leave. Shrike/Renfri, the Snow White archetype, cannot break in, but will relentlessly pursue him to the ends of the earth. It really is the immovable object versus the unstoppable force. Both sides are trying to recruit Geralt to break the impasse and using very similar tactics to try and win him over because they've got to break his code of ethics, which is he only goes after monsters. Renfri makes the same pitch, that it would be a lesser evil if the wizard dies alone. Geralt argues, if she goes after Stregobor in the tower, it won't just be that the wizard dies alone. A good number of the town's guardsmen will also die, because even though she's protected by the king, if she breaks the law, the aldermen will have to intervene. So although Geralt refused the wizard and Renfri, if townspeople are harmed, then Geralt will step in, especially to protect his friend and host, the alderman.
Well, it looks like we've got a real Mexican standoff here, boys! Woo!
And if you're thinking about adapting this story, there are a few pieces that I don't think can be changed. You can get rid of the alderman friend. There is an impact to that, I think, at the end of the story, but you can give his lines to other people. You can shift things around, you can rearrange things. You can have Geralt and Renfri meet earlier and more often in order to break up the exposition and introduce the conflict earlier. You can even take away Geralt's rat-killing incident with the fork and give it to some girl. But there's some things that you need to know. One of them is, why does Geralt behave the way he behaves? He ends up deciding to intervene. And you need to know why. When Renfri comes to him, Renfri provides Geralt with 2 options. And these are important because it provides information to the reader that she has a plan. Geralt and the reader lacks information to know what the full plan is. But plan 1, Stregobor leaves his tower. Geralt laughs at this. He'll never do it. Plan 2, she's going to present the Tridem Ultimatum. This is important. Geralt doesn't know what the Tridem Ultimatum means, and she moves on from that conversation, but it's a piece of information that's planted into the mind of the reader. This is important. 2 plans. The third plan, though, is to avoid the whole thing. Geralt needs to go into the tower and kill Stregobor himself. Part of the setup for you to understand why Geralt gets involved is setting up that Renfri is capable of great violence. Stregobor provides this by the examples of her torturing puppies and canaries way back when. Renfri herself confirms that she murdered the trapper, but as he was a very vile man, this one is understandable. We have good reason to doubt some of what Stregobor says as being biased. For instance, the cause of the gnome's death sounds like he's simply speculating and doesn't like them. But by far the most convincing thing that something is going on with Renfri, that she's not simply just a girl, that maybe this mutation thing has something to it, is his own actions. He claims that she has become immune to his magic. He's capable of doing magic. His only solution seems to be to lock himself in his tower and to not come out. This is by far the most convincing thing, to me as a reader anyways. Even if Geralt does not believe the Black Sun curse, there is something to the wizard's words because he's terrified to leave. Furthermore, our only interaction with Renfri's group of warriors shows them to be a very unsavory lot. Also, we learn that the stepmother and Stregobor tried to poison her. That poisoned apple comes into play. And she says that she hunted until I became the hunter, and confirms to murdering her stepmother. More information that helps inform the reader to Geralt's ultimate decision. Renfri's reply to this is, "You remember what I said?" she asked after a moment's silence. "There are offers you can't refuse. The consequences are so terrible, and this is one of them. Think it over." And then Renfri says something that ends up being quite prophetic. "I pity you," she said slowly, gazing at the medallion. "You claim a lesser evil doesn't exist. You're standing on a flagstone, running with blood, alone, so very lonely, because you can't choose, and you had to. And you'll never know, you'll never be sure if you were right, and your reward will be stoning and a bad word. I pity you. Remember that." Geralt stands his ground. "I am what I am." So almost all the pieces are in place, but there's one piece of information that Geralt doesn't have that we'll soon get. Renfri spends the night, disappears in the morning. She claims she's going to be leaving. Geralt has convinced her it's hopeless. She will not be able to get after Stregobor. So in the morning, she's gone. The next day, Geralt's alderman friend has learned new information about Renfri's brigands. One of them is recognized as a half-elf who was part of the massacre at Tridem. This perks up Geralt's ears because he had heard that one of her 3 plans was the Tridem ultimatum, but she did not explain. And this is the missing piece that allows the reader to understand. Tridem, didn't you hear of it? Everyone was talking about it 3 years ago. The Baron of Tridem was holding some brigands in the dungeon. Their comrades, one of them was the half-elf Sivril, seized a ferry full of pilgrims during the Feast of Nis. They demanded the Baron set those others free. The Baron refused. So they began murdering pilgrims, one after another. By the time the Baron released his prisoners, they'd thrown a dozen pilgrims overboard to drift with the current, and following the deaths, the Baron was in danger of exile or even execution. At the tribunal, the Baron argued he'd had no choice. He'd chosen the lesser evil to save more than 25 people, women and children on the ferry. The Tridem ultimatum, whispered the Witcher. So at this point, Geralt understands he's been deceived. She will confront Stregobor. She has not left town. And if he will not come out, she'll start murdering the townspeople one after another until Stregobor comes out. This is the piece that pushes Geralt to act. He wants the brigands arrested, but the aldermen cannot until they've actually done something because of the king's protection. And here, Geralt breaks from his ethic. He has all along said he does not believe in the lesser evil, but actually calls to that we must do the lesser evil. His alderman friend says, "I forbid it," but Geralt goes anyways to confront the men, and kills them all. The TV show is far too coy. The word ultimatum is used, but it's very vague.
You gave me an ultimatum, and I find they worked.
She gave us a message to pass on to you. You have to choose the lesser evil.
It's an ultimatum. Get it?
And it's like, no, I don't get it. What is actually being threatened? Only after Geralt has killed everyone does Renfri say,
I will kill everyone here until Stregobor comes down.
But this lacks power because all her men are dead that could carry this out. And Geralt has already intervened. So it's not nearly so clear why Geralt gets involved. And after killing them, Renfri enters the marketplace. And here is the final turn, and this is what makes the story so great. There's a lot of things you can skip. It's a given that an adaptation from book to another medium will not be one-to-one identical, but you cannot miss the heart of the story. But this next piece is what really makes this story from good to great. Geralt was going to stand off, maybe defend his friend if he had to, but he was not going to get involved. But then he found out, oh no, there's an ultimatum. She's going to be killing the townspeople one by one. Geralt likes to think of himself as simply a mercenary for hire to kill monsters. The fact is, he has this kind of repressed heroism within him that keeps on creeping out. And so he kills every one of Renfri's men in an effort to stop what he thinks will be a massacre. But he's wrong. Similar to the opening sequence of the story, where Geralt chose what he thought was the right path, but in the end it did not matter. Renfri returns You've made your choice, she said slowly. Are you sure it's the right one? This won't be another tridem, Geralt said with an effort. It wouldn't have been. Stregobor laughed in my face. He said I could butcher Blaviken and the neighboring villages and he would not leave his tower. And he won't let anyone in, not even you. This is the final turn. The selfishness of Stregobor had defeated her. Had Geralt not acted, no one would have died. His great defense for the town was for nothing. And now she feels compelled to fight Geralt for killing her companions. This is a terrible tragedy and an cruel twist of fate where two people who did not have to fight to the death both feel they must fight. He says, get out of here. She drew her sword quickly and nimbly. Renfri, no, you made your choice. Now it's my turn. There's this overarching fatalism with this. You tried to do the right thing. It didn't matter. And now more people are going to die. He mortally wounds her. She tries one last trick to kill him as she lies dying, but fails. She and her compatriots are dead, but for nothing. Stregobor arrives, wanting to perform an autopsy. Doesn't see the tragedy, only wants to confirm his theory. Geralt sends him packing. He fought needlessly for the town, but he never fought for the wizard's experimentation. Similar to the Kikimor at the beginning, Geralt has killed the threat too soon before anyone recognized the danger that they were in, and so they turn on Geralt. Throwing rocks at him, insulting him, exactly as Renfri had predicted. This is where he earns the name Butcher of Blaviken. Geralt himself is sent packing, and maybe the final last cruel twist to Geralt is his friend and host, really the only friendly face that he had in town, says to him, don't come back, never come back. And one thing I like about the story as well is its continued ambiguity as far as, is she actually a monster in the end? Because really, she could just be a very violent person, and a number of her violences are understandable. The trapper, which is just in line of self-defense. And the fact that the wizard himself admits, we weren't sure. It's possible we were wrong with the Black Sun curse, but we couldn't risk it. And tragically, Renfri herself doesn't know. She has been so changed and morphed by her horrible experiences growing up, being on the run, being assaulted at a very early age. Is she a monster? We don't know. She doesn't know. When Stregobor is trying to convince him that now that Renfri's dead, now is the time for an autopsy, he says the autopsy is the only way we can confirm. Geralt says, don't touch her. Stregobor, seeing the raised blade, jumped aside and waved a staff. All right, he shouted, as you wish, but you'll never know. You'll never be sure. Never, do you hear, Witcher? And that's what we're left. This state of ambiguity. Did he kill a monster or not? Was the curse real? Was it not? That's why I like Sapkowski's short stories. I find the ending rather haunting, but I think it's necessary that Geralt knows the specifics of the Tridem massacre to push him over the edge to intervene. It would have been worth visually showing the massacre on screen. And you needed to see that Geralt intervened to stop a massacre that never would have happened, because in the Great Standoff, Renfri blinked first. Stregobor is so selfish, he would have let entire villages die before turning himself over. It's an ending that sticks with you, which is why it is a great story.
Love it.